Good morning, everybody, and happy election day for the spring primaries today. I just want to be on with you early on in the day to answer any questions that you all might have and just to remind you what you can expect on the ballot for today. So like I've been saying in different lives throughout the last couple of weeks, today's most important office up for election is going to be the Superintendent of Public Instruction for the SOC districts. There are other people that are going to be on the ballot in different districts, but for the SOC district, the main one we're looking at today is for the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction for the state of Wisconsin. So I just want to go ahead and remind you all that you can hear this in Spanish. We have Spanish translation available right now, so you can call. So I'm just going to share that with people so that they can access that conference call if they need it. Hola, buenos días. Feliz día de las elecciones de primavera. Como siempre, ustedes pueden escuchar lo que estoy compartiendo en español a través de una llamada de conferencia. Y solamente hay que marcar 646-749-3122 y luego hay que poner la contraseña, cual es 779-328-221. Y voy a estar con ustedes ahora a las 8 a.m., luego a las 12 p.m., y nosotros como SOC vamos a estar con ustedes a las 3 en punto con SOC, como siempre, y luego a las 6 p.m. también para terminar el día y compartir cualquier información que surge durante el día. So I hope that whoever needs this information can get it. And again, I'm just going to share a little bit of information about what is up for election today. So give me just a second to put on some info for you. Take off the banner here. And so I just want to explain a little bit about what the State Superintendent of Public Instruction does. So the Superintendent of Public Instruction is the head of the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction. They oversee public schools and libraries. They seek and promote ways to improve schools. They evaluate performance of schools, and they are elected to serve a 4-year term, and it's a nonpartisan office. So if you look up any information on these candidates that I'll share in a second, you'll see that they aren't associated with any political party. And if you hear my dog slurping up some water in the background, don't worry about it. It's just the family dog enjoying some water. And so let's just explain a little bit about what the Department of Public Instruction does, because the superintendent is going to head this whole department. And what does that mean? The Department of Public Instruction is the entity that provides guidance and technical support to schools. They review and approve library staff, school administrators, and educator training programs and licenses. They ensure that school districts meet their responsibilities to students with disabilities as required by the Individuals with Disabilities Act. Then they also propose a state education budget to the governor. And this is actually the office that Governor Evers held before being governor. So that's interesting too. The Department of Public Instruction also distributes funding to public schools and libraries, and they administer the Wisconsin Educational Services Program for the deaf and hard of hearing and the Wisconsin Center for the Blind and Visually Impaired. And just some additional information for you all, the State Superintendent of Public Instruction makes an impact on our lives in many ways. Their decisions will impact school curriculum choices, education for children with disabilities, educator quality, so different ways of evaluating educators and supporting teachers. They impact public library resources, and they also impact educational opportunities for students. And there's many ways that you can decide who to vote for. We've been sharing vote411.org that lists out all of the candidates and has them answering questions that the League of Women Voters has asked of them. And all of these 7 candidates who will appear on the ballot today have answered those questions. So you want to check out vote411.org. And then you can, there's a process that you can do to decide who to vote for. One, decide what you're looking for in a candidate. So based on these things I just mentioned that the superintendent would impact, school curriculum, education for children with disabilities, educator quality, etc. Decide what issues are important to you, what qualities you're looking for in a leader, and which candidates' priorities align with your own values. And then also, you want to learn about the candidates. So also on this vote411.org is their social media, their website that talks about what's on their platform, what they care about. So even more information about each candidate. And then, their qualifications, their past education history, what their priorities are, all kinds of information. And then, of course, sort it out which candidates' priorities and views on the role best match your own views. And then who seems most prepared for the job, who has the most experience that's relevant, that you think is most relevant. And then, of course, who has the leadership qualities you're looking for. So those are just a few tools to help you make your decision and decide who should be this. So the primary, right, there's 7 candidates for superintendent of public instruction. And what we're deciding today is who is going to end up on the April ballot. And the April ballot, the April election, is going to have a number of other offices, including superintendent of public instruction. But for this primary, it is just these 7 candidates for superintendent of public instruction in the Southside districts. So I just wanted to share that with all of you. Again, you can use myvote.wisconsin.gov to find your polling place. And you can also use vote411.org to find that information out and to find out information on the different candidates as well. So if you have any questions throughout the day, we will be on with you again at 12 p.m., but you can go ahead and comment on this video at any point throughout the day, and I'll be monitoring the comments if you have any questions. You can reach out to SOC, and I'll share our information here for you all. 414-672-8090. I'll be answering the phones today. You can email us at soc@socmilwaukee.org, or you can visit our website. But if you have any major questions or urgent questions, give us a call. That will be the quickest way to get in touch with us. And I'm just going to go ahead and leave you all today with a video that is an intro to the different candidates that will be on the ballot. 6 of the 7 candidates did an interview with Wisconsin Eye, just outlining what they feel about the position, why they feel they're qualified, and what their vision is for public education in Wisconsin. So I will leave that video with you. Each candidate has a couple minutes that I compiled into one long video. So you'll see each candidate for 2 to 3 minutes. And I'll be back on with you at 12 p.m.
Dr. Sean Hendricks Williams of Milwaukee is one of 7 candidates for the office of Superintendent of Public Instruction. The primary is February 16th. The general election is April 6th. Dr. Sean, thanks for joining Wisconsin Eye.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, we've got a time limit here, and I've got a lot of questions, but I want to give you a minute, and I'll probably start my stopwatch just to give me a summary of why you're most qualified to be superintendent.
So certainly, I possess the same amount of education and licensures as my candidates. I have a little bit of an uncommon career trajectory in that I've worked over 25 years in public, private, charter, and higher ed. I have a very uncommon disposition in that I went from depending on the state to caring for my 2 children to actually serving at the executive level of the state in the office of the governor. Therefore, not only do I possess the knowledge and the skills and the experience, I possess the disposition and key relationships with the governor and legislators that will be needed in order to implement my Bill of Rights for students and increase outcomes in the state of Wisconsin.
Thank you. You were right on. You were right under that 1 minute. Let me ask a follow-up question. Why is it important that the next superintendent be someone of color, ma'am?
Well, I think because as we look at our achievement gaps and all of the things that the state is on the naughty list for, that I possess experience of actually navigating the systemic challenges. And my experience will be very instrumental in terms of looking at what it is we need to do in Wisconsin differently for educating our students of color, as well as recruiting teachers of color.
Thank you very much. Now, let's talk statewide, the impact of the pandemic on our K-12 schools, and what's your vision for our K-12 schools in the post-pandemic era after we're done with this horrible virus, ma'am?
Well, my vision is that we close an achievement gap. My vision also includes making sure that we have equitable, fully funded schools. In addition to that, my vision is to implement my Bill of Rights for students. And this is a 20-point policy platform that clearly articulates what students from K-3 through 12th grade will experience in their educational experience. And it is on the website. But some of the major things are making sure that we bring back what I call essentials: art, music, gym, phy-ed, health, world language, library, media, and computer science, as well as in the high school years, making sure that we have our students engage in internships and dual credit courses to prepare them for post-secondary life. The most important thing for me, and that is different that I bring, is a focus on post-secondary outcomes for children with disabilities. Many times we talk about making sure our children are college and career ready, but when we talk about college and career ready, we leave out a whole segment of student. We leave out my son, who has multiple severe disabilities. So we need to figure out how to prepare our children with disabilities for either a day program, shelter workshop, assisted employment, whatever. In addition to that, there is a lot of room for our students to make a really good living working in the trades. And so we need to bring back apprenticeships and give our students opportunities to look at the trades, the military, as well as volunteer opportunities such as a Peace Corps.
Steve Krall of Milwaukee is one of 7 candidates for the office of State Superintendent of Public Instruction. The primary is February 16th. The general election is April 6th, excuse me. Steve, welcome to Wisconsin Eye.
Hey, Steve, thank you.
Well, I've got a few questions and we're time limited, so I'm going to give you 1 minute, start my stopwatch. Why are you the most qualified to be superintendent?
Well, I appreciate it, Steve and WISI, for taking the time to do interviews with all the candidates. That's awesome. So I see Wisconsin at a crossroads right now. Opportunity for our kids are dwindling. I mean, I read recently, for the first time in the history of our country, we have a generation who is not doing economically as well as their parents. And I believe part of that is because of our education system. We've got massive amounts of inequities on where funding goes. And it seems that the wealthiest among us tend to have the most resources in their district because we rely on a system of property taxes. I have a lot more issues on this, but in a minute, I want to say that that's why I'm here. I'm calling for change on that. And I believe we need to do 3 things for our finances. The first is to move away from property taxes. That would, for schooling, that would result in like homeowners seeing up to a 30% decrease in their taxes for property. And then we have to establish a basic standard of care at the state level and fund it. So no matter where you live or where you move to, you've got a great school waiting. And I believe we need additional funding for equity. And because what we're doing right now hasn't worked. So we need to change this in order to make it better. Thank you.
Okay. You're a principal of a elementary school. Here's my question. The impact of the pandemic, not only on your school, but statewide, and what's your vision for a post-COVID K-12 system in Wisconsin, sir?
Sure. So I think one thing the pandemic did was really spotlight how in trouble our schools really are. I think that parents and the community members actually now see the challenges facing the schools with inequity. I mean, if we had smaller class sizes, good ventilation, and the PPE needed, we wouldn't necessarily need to have closed the way we did. So what I believe we need to do is take this opportunity and this momentum we have right now and say, well, how can we plan not only for the next pandemic, but how can we ensure that we've got a top-notch education system for every child? And those things will fit hand in hand. I mean, if we can create a great system, it will naturally allow us to overcome this type of challenge that the pandemic has given us.
Sheila Briggs of DeForest is one of 7 candidates for the office of Superintendent of Public Instruction. And the primary is February 16th. The general election is April 6th. Sheila, welcome to Wisconsin Eye.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I have a standard opening question for everybody. You have 1 minute to tell us why you're most qualified to be the superintendent, please.
Fantastic. So I began my 30-year career as a kindergarten teacher. Later, I became principal and then worked in the central office at the Madison Metropolitan School District, supporting 32 elementary school principals. I couldn't have imagined leaving until Tony Evers gave me a call in 2011, and he asked me to join DPI as the Assistant State Superintendent. And so I jumped at the opportunity, and then I was reappointed by Carolyn Stanford Taylor in 2019 when Tony became our governor. So serving in the State Superintendent's cabinet for the last 10 years has been a really incredible experience. And so I know that we still have a lot of work to be done, and I am ready to continue that work, leading our state as the next state superintendent.
Nicely timed. Okay, first question. You have on your website a quote saying a pandemic is an opportunity, quote, a portal, a gateway between one world and the next. Tell me your vision for K-12 in Wisconsin once we get through the pandemic, please.
Yeah, so all of my priorities are really wrapped around this idea that school wasn't working for all of our kids prior to the pandemic. So we have to really decide that we're going to move forward in a way that's different. I think there are many things that we really need to rethink about what we're doing when it comes to education. First of all, we need to make sure that we are looking at the priorities that we expect for our kids. And that has to be beyond just reading and test scores. We really got to look at our kids as whole children and make sure that we're approaching all of the different important aspects of education that we care about as Wisconsinites. Second, we need to get back to making sure our teachers are in a place of honor and support and listen to their voices in what we're doing in the classroom. And secondly, we've learned some things through this pandemic. A few things have actually worked really well, and we need to make sure we bring those things into the future so that we're making sure that every kid gets the education that they deserve.
Which of our K through 12 students have been hurt the most by our pandemic, Sheila?
Yeah, I think it's varied a lot. We have some special education students that we're really struggling to meet their needs, particular in a remote setting for some, although I have heard some stories of students that are getting their needs better than ever in a remote environment. So I think that's something that we have to consider. Certainly our students that are living in poverty and our students of color that oftentimes have parents that are serving on the front lines and aren't able to be home and support them in the way that others are struggling immensely. And that's why we've worked to make sure that kids have safe spaces to go and get support during the day for remote instruction in places like Milwaukee and Madison.
Jill Underley of Hollandale is one of 7 candidates for the office of Superintendent of Public Instruction. The primary is February 16th. The general election is April 6th. Jill, welcome to Wisconsin Eye.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, I've enjoyed interviewing. You're the 6th candidate, and I have a standard opening question. You have 1 minute to describe why you're the most qualified candidate.
All right, very good. My platform is all about equity, giving every child what they need every day. And this was crafted from my own experiences as a parent of 2 children, a teacher, an elementary and high school principal, a UW student affairs professional, and an administrator at DPI. Both in educator licensing and in Title I, which is federal programs that I worked on in Milwaukee and Green Bay. And most lately as the superintendent of the Pecatonica Area School District. I'm all about public schools 100% all the way. I support public schools and I'll advocate for increased funding in mental health, early childhood, and teacher recruitment. Plus, I'm the only candidate who's currently leading a school district during the pandemic. I've seen firsthand the inequities that exist in our neediest schools. The pandemic has amplified the needs for universal early childhood programming, affordable high-speed wireless internet, and the need for collaboration. And I have experience working with school boards, administrators, union leaders, legislators, and professional organizations at the local, state, and federal level.
Well, I want to talk about one provision on your campaign site. Adequate and fair funding. Can you be more specific? Are you talking about going beyond the 2/3 state funding? Are you talking about reducing the amount of property taxes that goes for K-12? Talk to me a little bit more about what adequate and fair funding means, please.
Sure. Adequate and fair funding means that every school has what they need, or every school district has what they need to provide for the kids. We have always said that the promise has been 2/3 funding, and we know that that promise, especially in the last decade and a half, has not materialized. We see a lot of discrepancies, especially with the introduction of new categorical aids such as per pupil aids. And also our school districts do not get fully reimbursed for special education costs. And so, you know, right now it's around 30%. And so our school districts have to transfer large sums from their general fund to cover special education because we have to balance those out. And my district transfers almost $500,000 every year. And that money comes from programs that serve all kids. And so the state needs to step up their obligation.
Troy Gunderson of West Salem is one of 7 candidates for the office of the State Superintendent of Public Instruction. The primary is February 16th. The general election is April 6th. Troy, welcome to Wisconsin Eye.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, I've got a few questions on issues, but I want to give you a minute, and I'll time it just to give us a summary of why you're most qualified to be state superintendent, please.
Well, my name is Troy Gunderson, and I just retired after a 35-year career in public education. I was a teacher, a principal, and a superintendent. I'm 5th generation from Wisconsin. My mother's a teacher, my wife's a teacher, my father-in-law's a teacher. Public education is all we know. It's what we've done our entire life. I think compared to the other 5, I have a statewide perspective that some of them can't bring to the table. I'm just drop dead passionate about moving the needle ahead for the entire state. And I think that's going to cause us to take a few looks at equity around the way we pay and around the way we treat race and gender and all of those kinds of things. But I think what separates me is passion, a statewide view, and I just want to do this, and I think I can make a difference.
Well done. Okay, let's talk about the impact of COVID on K-12 schools statewide. Specifically, what's your vision for K-12 schools in the post-COVID era, assuming we get there?
Well, I think the first thing we need to do is assess what happened in terms of the learning gaps for kids and being able to give the resources to the schools they need to reconnect with students. Also to be able to assess what worked well and what didn't. I think like any type of crisis, we learn some new stuff and we're able to leverage that. And so how can we leverage that moving forward after we reconnect to the families and see where they're at? But I think the most important piece for me is to be able to stop and think about what role can public education have in moving the entire state forward in a post-COVID world. I think that our economy, our society, our whole way of life in Wisconsin is dependent upon public education stepping to the forefront and being a player and moving us ahead in terms of serving families, communities, and children to create the next generation of workers.
Deborah Kerr of Caledonia is one of 7 candidates for the office of State Superintendent of Public Instruction. The primary is February 16th. The general election is April 6th. Deborah, welcome to Wisconsin Eye.
Thank you very much.
Well, time is limited. I know you're busy, and I've got a long list of questions, but take a minute and give us your elevator speech and why you're the most qualified to be state superintendent, please. I'm counting. Okay.
Okay, here we go. I've dedicated the last 40 years of my life to education. I've worked in all sectors of education. I'm parochial educated. I've taught in the private school. I've created a 4K charter school, and I've dedicated the last 34 years of my life to public education. I'm an award-winning teacher, principal, high school athletic director, successful basketball coach, and I've also worked in rural schools as well as suburban schools. I have been elected presidential leadership at the Milwaukee Rotary, our state superintendent's organization as president, and our national state superintendent's association. And so I have great relationships with people on both sides of the aisle. I have advocated for kids for the last 5 years at Congress and at the state capitol, and I have gotten teacher licensing laws changed and implemented to put more teachers into the pipeline. And I've got the energy and passion to do it. And if you need more information, kerforkids.com will tell my whole story. But I've also the only candidate who has closed achievement gaps, raised graduation rates for kids of color, and won state and national awards of character.
Okay, well done. Okay.
All right.
My turn. Questions. The
Okay.
impact of the pandemic on our K-12 schools. What's been the biggest, most significant change, damage to our K-12 schools? What's your vision for our K-12 schools post-pandemic, please, ma'am?
This pandemic has exacerbated all of the inequities that we've known existed for a long time. And so we need to address the extensive learning loss of all of our kids. All of our kids are not winning right now in Wisconsin, Steve. And we've got to come together as communities to make sure that all of our kids are served and served well. That means equitable technology, robust internet, food insecurity issues have to be dealt with, but now we got to get back to face-to-face instruction. I am the only candidate that's come out with a statewide plan to do so. Our administrators and our leaders are ready to do that. Our teachers want to come back and see our kids. Our parents have been heroic in dealing with this virtual learning and their abilities to support us. And so it's now time to get back to business and get back to putting our kids back on track to achieve excellence in all that they do.